All right, thanks for joining us today. This is just our reminder that we do record all of our Coffee Connects. We also have the PDF of the slides. They are all available here on this link. So the Nebraska MTSS Media Library, if you would like to access any of those previous recordings, or if you want to go back and share this one around circles with any of your colleagues as well. All right, so we are going to be sharing a little bit about using circles as a tier 1 support. So thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you hopping on, especially with the reschedule from last week with the crazy Nebraska weather. So thanks for joining us as we share a little bit about circles. We'll start with just some quick introductions. I'm Jill Gunther. I'm one of the social emotional behavioral learning specialists, and I currently serve Region 2 and 3, so ESUs 2, 3, and OPS, and then ESUs 1, 7, and 8. And I'll pass it to Mackenzie.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Mackenzie Rydell. I'm a social emotional behavior learning specialist in Region 1. So that includes ESUs 4, 5, and 6, and also OPS. And we also have Chandra Essex, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Yeah, I'm Chandra Essex. I'm the SEBL specialist for Region 4. So I work with ESUs 9, 10, 11, and 17.
Thank you. All right, our welcoming inclusion activity today seemed fitting for this time of year. Hopefully, maybe some of you are planning maybe a summer getaway, a summer vacation, but let's take a little opportunity to just quick build a dream vacation. So if you would like to participate, we would love to see what you build. You can drop it in the chat. So we have some options for transportation. Maybe it's a car, maybe it's a plane. We have a couple destinations, beach, or maybe going on to the mountains. Activities. Do you like to relax or do you like to go on adventures? And then who's going with you? Are you taking your family or are you taking friends? Give you a minute to take a look at those. For me, I would definitely be a B for transportation, a 1, the beach for destination. My activity would be let's relax. And who's going? I definitely wouldn't be relaxing if it was my family going. So I'm going to pick friends for that one. Oh, yeah. Some great combinations going in the chat.
Jill, I'm similar. I would be a beach, relaxing, so flying. And if I took my husband only, I could relax. If I had to take my kids, I would not relax. So then I would take my friends. So.
Yes, yes. Love it. Awesome. We got some adventurous people, it looks like. We got some beach people. Oh, thanks for participating, everybody. How about go alone? Also a great option there, Scott. Adding your own adventure. Yes, definitely get some relaxation time that way. All right, that comes from First Five. You guys have probably heard us talk about First Five before. If you are not receiving those daily emails or if you have not checked out their site, be sure to do that. We have it linked in the slides. We also have our Padlet reminder here. So tons and tons of resources that we just keep adding to in the Padlet. So for this one, we have some resources around using circles as those tier 1 supports. We also have all of our previous Coffee Connects. We have those resources that we have linked in, and then also those recording links as well. So be sure to check that out. The password is on there, capital MTSS. And just to kind of start us off, kind of ground us a little bit in a quote, really thinking about circles, really thinking about restorative practices. Some of you may know we've been doing a lot of restorative practices foundational trainings across the state. But today we're really just focusing on one piece of that. So really just focusing on what are circles, how can we use circles as one of those tier 1 supports. But love this here. Circles have been used in restorative practices to develop connections between peers through that sharing of experiences as well as concerns. So when we think about restorative practices throughout our trainings, we really focus a lot on the history of restorative practices because the history we know is such an important piece, such an important component of the work of itself. All right. And then just our reminder of when we're talking about those tier one supports, specifically today, really talking about circles, we're really supporting that social, emotional, behavioral learning, really building that system to support both students as well as adults. We're working to build those environments where all involved can feel safe, can feel supported, and open to share as well. It really helps support those positive behaviors as well as those positive mental health outcomes. And then when we kind of dig into defining some of those skills and what they might look like, and as you see today, we'll really kind of share like how we can target a lot of these skills within circles, but kind of thinking about those 5 different categories or those 5 different areas of skills. Those skills of self-awareness, of self-management, working through the problem-solving process, building those relationships, and then that pro-social behavior. So really kind of that breakdown, and we'll explore just a little bit about how we might be able to target some of those skills through circles. So when we think about restorative practices, we can really think about it as a continuum. So on that continuum, really kind of going from that preventative to that responsive side. And as we kind of go along this continuum, circles you'll see really fall within that preventative. We can get to using circles more on that responsive side, but we want to start small. We want to build those relationships. We want to build some of those skills within Circle. And I think another important piece of this, or another important reminder of this, is sometimes when we think of circle work or when we think of restorative practices, we kind of go to that responsive side just automatically. We think of it as more of that practice of dealing with frustration or dealing with anger or dealing with shame. But we really want to think about it in terms of how it falls on a continuum and how we can really use circles to be proactive, to be preventative, how we can use them in those day-to-day experiences, and really throughout everything that we're doing within the classroom, outside of the classroom, with our staff. And so as you can see here, we kind of have them outlined as affective statements, affective questions, really falling in that continuum of preventative, but a way that we can change our language, how we're speaking to one another, how we're speaking to students, how we're speaking to adults, and really kind of how we're bringing that affective language into things. The next piece is changing the way that we gather. So being able to use circles as a community building tool, as just kind of some of those proactive ways to engage in conversations and maybe even using a little bit of those restorative questions. And then on that responsive side, we have how we're changing the way that we respond to harm. So those are going to be things like responsive circles, maybe restorative chats, or a formal conference. So just kind of a nice way to think about it. And then we have our triangle of tier 1 core supports, tier 2 targeted, and then tier 3 intensified, kind of flipped on its side just to make a nice little visual there of how we kind of move from that preventative to that responsive side there. All right, so just to kind of ground us in those reminders of what does tier 1 core mean, we have our definitions here. So really when we're thinking about tier 1 core, we're talking about that 75 to 80% approximately of those students who are reaching that benchmark criteria. When we say that benchmark criteria, thinking about those universal screening tools that we might be using. If we are at that 80% or above, we want to celebrate that. We want to celebrate what we're doing at that tier 1 core level and continue to do those things, and maybe even continuing to intensify those things, right? Like, we're doing a great job here. How can we continue to bring these great things that we're doing for all students, and continue to work on those? If it's below that 75%, we want to take a look at what we're doing, and build those tier 1 core practices, intensify those tier 1 core practices. So what we're doing for all students. So just those reminders of tier 1 core supports and kind of how we define those. We're really working to foster that positive climate, that inclusive climate, that safe climate. We're working to engage families, engage community partners. So really what we're doing in terms of all stakeholders. We want to focus on that well-being. So focusing on both staff as well as student well-being, and really provide those whole child supports. So how we're supporting students socially, emotionally, behaviorally, academically, environmentally, and then of course, using our data to make decisions. So circles, how do we define circles? So circles are really a structure. It's a way that we might gather, and it works to really promote all of these pieces here. Works to promote equality. So when we are in a circle, everyone in that circle really has that equal seating. It really works to promote safety as well as trust, because we can see everyone in that circle. Nothing is hidden within that circle. It also works to provide that responsibility and promote that responsibility, because every person will have that opportunity to share if they choose to. We all play a part, we all play a role in that circle. It also promotes facilitation. So it reminds us that that leader, that circle leader, is there to help facilitate what's going on in the circle, not a lecture, right? It also provides that ownership, so that everybody within that circle really feels like it's their own, right? They have a stake in that circle. They have a role, a responsibility within that circle. And then it helps build those connections as well. So building those connections by everyone getting an opportunity to share, everyone really being encouraged to listen to others' responses throughout that circle time. And here we have another continuum. So really thinking about, in our circles, we also have a continuum of intensity of the work. And so as you can see kind of on the left side, it's going to be more of those low level, low intensity, things like doing games, doing team building activities within Circle, doing any of those really community building pieces that we are working to implement within the schools. As we continue down this continuum here, we get into deepening relationships and then responding to harm, which is going to be more of the high level, the high intensity. And when we think about really those building those deeper relationships, we have to reveal more of ourselves, right? So there's more that goes into it in order for that to occur. We always want to start on that left side. So really thinking about those pieces in that red and that orange, and then build onto that. We want that transformation, that strong foundation to really be happening. We want to be using circles in fun things like games, like the academic pieces. And then we get into building those relationships and then deepening and cultivating those relationships. And then finally, we get to the being able to use circles to respond to harm. As we think about really kind of that intensity of circle work, we know that that circle space really provides that opportunity for all involved to share their emotions, to really take stake in themselves as well as the rest of the community within the circle. It really helps to create that safe, that brave space for all involved. Okay, so now we can get into those critical features of a circle. So when we talk about critical features, there's 7 critical features that we talk about. So again, if you have heard about or been a part of our Restorative Practices Foundational series, you might know that we have partnered with Allie Hearn, and she really talks about the 7 critical features of a circle. You also might hear kind of big C circles or little c circles. We won't get into a ton of that today, but when we hear big C, it's really meaning we're including all of those critical features there. When we hear little c, it might just be including a few of those critical features of a circle. As we think about those critical features, we know that not every circle is going to have all of those critical features, but we also know that the more that we have in place, the more of those features that we have, it's going to have a greater impact. It's going to have a greater transformation that will really take place within that circle. So those 7 features are sitting all students in a physical circle, having an intentional opening, creating agreements, using a talking piece, an opportunity for each person to speak, always an option for passing, and then having an intentional closing. So we're going to explore these a little bit more. The other thing I wanted to mention is that when we have a circle, typically we'll have like a facilitator of the circle or a circle keeper. And so that can be a student, it could also be an adult. So as we're going through these critical features, just be thinking about that as well. And then knowing that our circle typically goes in a sequential order as well. So that first critical feature, so sitting all students in a physical circle with nothing in the middle. So this really promotes that building of community, that building of connection, really that equality, that fairness. When we meet within that circle, it really just levels the playing field, right? We talked about that a little bit, but everyone can see everyone else. There's nothing that's hidden. When we think about really maybe using, and this doesn't have to be, but maybe using a purposeful centerpiece. So those could be things like maybe it's a piece of clothing, maybe it's a plant of some sort, maybe it's guidelines, maybe it's our values that we've established and we just have those within the center of the circle, or maybe it's a symbolic item of some sort. The purpose of having maybe a centerpiece of some sort can be, it can really provide some place for participants' eyes to kind of lay during that circle. So if you don't want to, be giving that eye contact to the speaker or as things are going around the circle, maybe you can focus on that purposeful centerpiece. So that's one thing. The other is maybe it's just that symbolic piece. So it's something that we want to have as we have built that community. It provides that way to maybe feel or that reminder of feeling welcomed and represented within the circle. So definitely a piece of it can be adding a centerpiece, but that critical feature really is sitting in that actual physical circle. The second critical feature is an intentional opening. So we have a couple resources for you and examples as well. If you've been through the Foundational Restorative Practices training, you also know that we have some Padlets as part of the community of practice with some different examples, some different ideas of some intentional openings to use for circle. So that's definitely a resource. If you've been with us for a while, you know that we always share things like First Five. We have our welcoming inclusion slide decks that we have shared. If you need those are all within that connection toolkit there. We have tons and tons of links for really just relationship building. So not all of them are necessarily just for intentional openings. It could also be used for those intentional closings or just relationship building tools as well. So as we're thinking about that intentional opening, we really want to ensure that we're greeting everyone, we're thanking them for coming. We want to be clarifying that purpose of our circle today as well. And then we really want to set the tone for the circle. Other examples when we think about those openings could be things like maybe it's just an opportunity for a mindful moment. Maybe it's some type of connection or community building activity. Maybe it's a quick icebreaker question, things like from the first five or our welcoming inclusion slide decks. Maybe it's a quick feelings check-in on a scale of 1 to 5 or on a scale of cat or on a scale of, whatever it might be. Just doing a quick feelings check-in so you can see how everybody is feeling before we begin circle. Or maybe it's just a values intention. You have your values and you're identifying what I'm really going to focus on today of those values. Speaking of values, so the third critical feature here is creating agreements or creating norms. So when we think about norms or those guidelines, they're really the agreements that that group is coming to. When we think about agreements or norms, they're really similar to what we might establish within our schools as far as those expectations, same type of things, right? Those expectations, values. It's what we really want to ground ourselves in. It's what we want to come back to when a disagreement happens, or what we want to come back to when maybe we're not all following those values or those agreements. We want to bring that conversation back to what we've all agreed upon. It's a great way to just build those connections and really begin to create that safe space for everyone involved. So we have lots of resources here for you. A couple visuals on the side. So the one that you see here is an activity that we've done with educators before in really identifying those shared values and collective commitments, things that we've encouraged them to do at the beginning of the year with their students. Build those shared values, those collective commitments with your class as a whole. Do it with your staff, do it with your PLC, do it with your team to really identify like what are those values that we really hold true, that we really want to always bring our conversations back to when we're making a decision, when we are having a disagreement. What do we all agree upon? And then just kind of building off that activity, that second visual that you see there is taking those shared values and then building those collective commitments. So what are those collective commitments that we're all really kind of focusing on? So that activity, we have kind of a step-by-step there outlined in that handout, if that's something that you would like to do. We'd also love to help your staff with that. So if you have questions about how we've done that activity or how we've shared that activity in the past, be sure to reach out. Also on the slide, we have a few other just resources around co-creating those agreements, exploring kind of some staff norms, and then some resources around why values are important as well. Our fourth critical feature here, so using a talking piece. When we say a talking piece, it can be any significant object. So we really want that object to have significance in some way to the group. It helps maintain the flow of the circle, and it really gives that structure to the circle. So definitely an important piece of it. Really teaching that when a person has that talking piece, it means they should be the only one speaking. Everyone else is listening to that person who has the talking piece and who is sharing. Really want to encourage that active listening, what that looks like, what that sounds like, what that means for the group. And then also with that talking piece, we want to ensure that all voices are heard. So it's the passing of the talking piece around the circle. If participants choose to pass, that is perfectly okay. But we really want to focus on teaching the use, teaching the skill of how we use that talking piece. We want to continue to revisit it too. So if we're using the talking piece, but maybe not following that, we want to go back and we want to reteach that skill of what that talking piece means, how we use it, and then what that active listening looks like. The other piece, I guess I forgot to mention as well with the talking piece is just ensuring that you identify some sort of piece that really has significance within the group. Um, it might be something that the students create together. It might be something that the staff creates together. Maybe it's something that someone within the circle has brought and they can explain what that significance to the piece is to them. But anything that really can bring in that relationship building as well. All right, critical features 5 and 6 here are the opportunity for each person to speak. So going through rounds, so going through that circle, and then always having that option for passing as well. So we really want to provide the opportunity for each person within the circle, that opportunity to speak in that predictable way or that predictable pattern. So going around the circle sequentially. We also want to allow anybody to pass if they feel like they want to pass. So it really explicitly stating that they can pass, reminding them as you begin the circle that that's always an option. We also really want to think about if there's a lot of passing going on, we want to think about it in terms of regarding that as fear and not defiance, and how we can really continue to build those relationships and build that community so that everybody does feel comfortable in sharing and really kind of building that in as well. It also can be a reminder to us that maybe we have gone too fast down that continuum, and maybe we need to go back to some of that low level, low intensity of that community building or using those games, really kind of those lower level relationship building activities. It could mean that we've maybe kind of gone more to that high level, high intensity use of the circle, and we need to kind of just take a little bit of a step back. And the last critical feature here, so critical feature 7 is having that intentional closing. So again, I would refer back to some of those connection toolkit activities or resources can certainly be used for an intentional closing. I will add that when we think about the closing, a lot of times it can feel rushed, right? We kind of get to the point where like, oh, we are out of time or we only have a minute left. But really, that reminder that that intentional closing is an important piece, and it can be something that's quick. It can be a quick hands in the middle or a quick word of appreciation. It could be, if we have time to do just like a one word quick round throughout. But it can be something fast like that hands in the middle or toes in the middle. So that's okay too, but really knowing that that intentional closing is also an important piece. We want to thank everybody for being a part of the circle. We want to close it out in some way. That could be a feelings check-in and doing a comparison from the beginning opening to the later closing. It could be that one word, just kind of how are we feeling, or a word of appreciation as we're going around. But it really helps serve as that transition. So we're closing our circle, we're moving on to the next activity or to whatever comes next in the day. So an important piece we don't want to forget, but also know it can be something that's quicker as well.
All right, so here's just a quick video example. This is a closing, but it's a little bit more extensive than you might do every day. And I'll debrief a little bit after the video.
So we're gonna do the closing ceremony. Cause you have an opening one, so why not have a closing one? I mean, you have to close it out with something good. This little basket is gonna go around. Everybody will pick a name, and then you say appreciation.
I want to appreciate Alfredo because he was hella nice.
I appreciate Matthew. You're a good friend, and I know I can trust you with stuff.
I want to appreciate you because you're really nice and you're really fun to hang out with, and you did a good job leading this.
I appreciate Sarah because this whole week and last week, Sarah's just been making me laugh, and she just got a good attitude, and she's so helpful. She helps me whenever I need help, I see her like a sister.
I want to appreciate Pancho for staying strong after going through a lot and having to wear that and being under house arrest and not being able to go out.
I want to appreciate you because on everything you do, you always give it like 120%. Like you really just express yourself in everything you do. And best friend.
Everybody clap for Kazuya and Jennifer and yourselves.
All right. This
So
is
we're gonna do
actually
the-
just a quick like snippet of a longer video. So I just put that link in the chat. And it kind of goes through, it's not like verbatim each of the critical features, but it goes through a lot of them. And you'll see they're using a centerpiece, they have their values established. And obviously this age group is a little bit older. And so one thing that I loved about this is that student who was talking in the beginning of that snippet, her and another co-facilitate the circle process and plan the circle and all of that. And so it's a really cool example of how you can really transfer the ownership and that community building to the peers themselves in the older population. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the skills of circles and kind of like the boots on the ground planning. So we're going to start with circle scripts, and a script is really just a plan, kind of like a lesson plan for what you're going to cover in the circle. And I think sometimes people are a little nervous about them, or they don't know where to get them, or they don't know what to do in the circle. And it really, like, the circle is just a structure and a tool that you're using, and you can insert any content or any conversation into the use of that structure. So we can do this more intentionally by using scripts, and you can make your own. You can use AI to help you, or you can even use pre-existing resources. There's a ton of resources out there of already created scripts, but I don't want people to feel like they have to find something that's already created, because it's really not that difficult to make your own. I went through a training on restorative practices, and one of the activities we did was actually break out into small groups and make our own scripts. And then at the end of the training, we had like 12 to 15 different circle scripts already created just by the group members. And so what we did was, in our small group, we just talked about like what kind of circle were we going to write a script for? Was it going to be proactive, small group, larger group? What was the topic? So my group decided to do something, I think it was on vaping, because all of us, we were all from different districts, knew that that was kind of a topic that was coming up a lot across the board. So we created the goal of the circle and made some questions for answering, but it really wasn't too hard. And it's definitely something you could do like at a beginning of your staff meeting or a planning day, to create scripts that are really applicable to your population. Maybe it's aligned with your curriculum. If you have like certain school-wide values or expectations, you can line it up. But also know there are plenty of resources out there already made. So the middle example and the right on this slide here, those are just example kind of like fillable scripts where you can just plug in different activities for those critical features. And then that bottom right one, Rock Restorative, this is Rochester, New York. They have a whole web page from their school district on the restorative practice work they're doing, which includes a subsection of already made scripts. But they also have a ton of other things. I dove deep into the website for a while when we were creating this. So if you're looking for resources on scripts, but also just in general, restorative practice in general, I would encourage you to go check out that website. As we're using circles, we're really practicing those social emotional behavioral skills inherently. When you're doing restorative practice as well, and when you're doing circles, you're just naturally hitting on a lot of the different skills that we have in our skills star. So I'm just going to call out some of those skills that we're practicing. So respect, Jill mentioned one of those critical features is making sure everyone gets the opportunity to speak. With the talking piece, it really helps people practice that listening, that active listening skill, and that self-management and self-regulation of knowing when to talk and when to not talk. We're also thinking about equality and that circle structure. Nobody is more important than anyone. Everyone has the same expectations. So it's also really neat for the adults to come in and really be a model and be an equal in circle where they're able to share some of themselves and share their humanness, and then also the students, and just really having that equal playing field. In that video that we showed earlier on, there's a snippet of the teacher who's in that circle and how she has come to the circle and really been taking part as an equal peer in the circle. We're also practicing empathy and emotional literacy skills. So really having the opportunity to share about how we're feeling isn't necessarily something that's natural in our everyday lives, but creating that space to do that, to learn about different emotions, to hear what is going on in other people's lives. Sometimes we address it a little bit in our foundational training is the circle isn't a therapy session, but as we're creating that community, it is more likely that things that are difficult in life may come up. And so just providing that space for people to feel heard. And oftentimes they're just wanting to feel heard and then moving on. But giving the opportunity to talk and share. In that video that we showed, there was a student who threw out an appreciation for a student who was on house arrest. And as part of that circle, earlier on in the video, that student who was on house arrest actually talked about how one of the prompts was, if you could go back and think before you did something, what would it be? And that was his example of, I would probably be in less trouble if I paused and thought a little bit more about my actions. And so it's kind of cool, just like we're all human and we all can create a space to have those conversations and to reflect on it. Problem solving, we are problem solving in circle, whether it's just processing something out loud, but you can even have a circle dedicated to problem solving, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then thinking about responsibility with words and actions and accountability within those circles. And then the obvious self-regulation, self-awareness, being able to regulate when you're speaking, when you're listening. I love when we're using a talking piece, it really forces you to not respond immediately, and you really have to delay when you speak because you speak when it's your turn, which can really change what you say if you're having to wait before you respond. And then thinking about shared leadership, everyone really has that equal part in the circle. You're really honing in on those leadership skills if you're facilitating the circle. And then multiple perspectives. Everyone has different experiences. So really tagging in on those relationship skills and those pro-social behaviors of understanding multiple perspectives. So there's a lot of different activities we can do in circle. We broke it down into a few. Just know this isn't all of them. Circles are so versatile, but these are some of those main ones. So the first one is teaching. This can be teaching academic things. It can be teaching social emotional skills. And so you can have a circle where you're doing your social emotional curriculum lesson. It can be reteaching expectations. Maybe you're bringing people together to talk about an upcoming unit to assess prior knowledge. Maybe you're brainstorming together for an assignment that's coming up, or you do a lab and you're bringing it back and sharing out, discussing takeaways from a lesson or a unit. sharing your academic goals, setting goals, reviewing for a test, gaining input. There's just so many different ways you can use a circle to teach different skills. And when we're doing this work in circle, we're really shifting that engagement from being more passive of students being a recipient of their learning to being a more active participant and engaging actively in their own learning. And we can kind of do 2 in 1 by strengthening relationships while also addressing some of those content areas. We also can have community building activities within Circle. So this is really those low level, low intensity, but building up that trust and community. So when things do happen, we're better equipped to address them. So we're thinking about building relationships, maybe having a daily check-in, setting up your classroom norms, values, and agreements, establishing that trust and creating that supportive, safe, and welcoming environment. We can have celebration circles. So coming together to share and affirm and celebrate individuals or also groups, sharing happy news, positive events, accomplishments, things like that. So here we are to problem solving. We can use circles to problem solve, to identify and address challenges that are happening around us in our community, in our classrooms, walking through disagreements as a group, and discussing issues and topics, whether they're in the community, on the news, in the world, really diving into that. We can use circles for that. An idea is to use the problem-solving model as circle rounds. So you could go around and talk about identifying the problem, and then you can go around and analyze why it's occurring, plan, and then talk about what you're going to do to address the issue. In a training that I was in, we used a fishbowl approach to the circle. So this is a little different. It's not a sequential circle. But there's actually 2 circles, and then we had one person in the middle, and they had talked about some behavioral challenges they were having with the student, and then the people were sharing ideas, problem-solving ideas for how to address the behavior, and then the outer circle was listening, and if they had anything to add, they would join the circle and give their comment. And it was just a really neat experience to use circle intentionally in a problem-solving way. We use circles with students, but we can't forget that using them with staff is a really powerful tool. We can use them as part of our team meetings, our professional developments, staff meetings, to really build that collaboration, set visions, make decisions, provide feedback, and reflect on practice. If you're using circles as a staff, you're really building up the staff skills to then go out and be good models and good facilitators for doing this work with students. We can use circles for parent and community engagement, whether it's just showing them and introducing the circle process. We can help develop partnerships, welcome new members, hold meetings like parent-teacher conferences or IEP meetings, or just use them to get feedback from our community stakeholders for the school. And just a couple secrets to success when it comes to using circles. We want to have a clear topic, a goal and direction of the circle. If you're not clear with what the circle is to accomplish or what we're doing, the people in the circle won't be clear either, and it won't be as successful. We really want to set a positive tone, and we're doing this by really doing that 80% proactive circles, building those light topics that people can get to know each other and build that trust and community. Because why we've really been hitting on that foundational piece is if we don't do that and then we try to do responsive circles, it really won't be as smooth because you don't have that trust built up and that accountability, and it won't be as successful. So we really want to start positive. We want to start with those preventative circles to see more success as we continue continue building into those responsive practices. We want to keep our focus of the circle. It sometimes can get off topic and come back on. So really, as a circle keeper, circle facilitator, keeping the focus of the topic and the rounds. Get some allies. So if you're just starting this, you can identify some maybe student leaders and talk to them ahead of time. Give them the prompts so they might be able to process beforehand, so they can really come to the table and be a good model to help get things off to the right foot. Being okay with silence. It's kind of an uncomfortable process if people aren't used to it. So just know that silence is okay. You don't have to fill it up with noise. And as you start small, it will continue. It'll come as you build it, but it's not going to be natural when you first start. Active listening, being able to hear what people are saying or not saying in a circle, and then being able to identify how you might change prompts for the next round of questions if it's not quite getting to where you were hoping as the facilitator. And then just being able to pay attention to body language. There might be something going on in the room, maybe people seem distracted, and being able to identify that and maybe call it out if things seem off, to be able to address it and then come together as a community to identify how to move forward. So circles can be used everywhere and for anything. We can use a circle almost any time, but not all the time. And realizing that it's important to plan that if you are planning to roll this out at a district level, you're planning it so kids aren't in circle every single day, every single period, circle after circle after circle, but wanting to use them intentionally. Circles can be used for a variety of purposes, from setting classroom norms to resolving conflict. And we just reviewed a couple examples of how you can use circles, but the key purpose, the thing that's in common for all of these, is that we're really building community and relationship through all of those different types. So we'll just close out with some resources. This first one, we wanted to shout out the Chicago Public Schools Restorative Practice Toolkit. They have a ton of great resources around restorative practices, and they have an entire chapter based on circles. And so we just screenshotted some of our favorite ones here. So thinking about different circle topics or prompting questions, we have some challenges, kind of like a Q&A type thing. But just know that we linked it in on the right picture there. And if you're really wanting to dive deep, great resource to look into. And ending with that triangle again of the continuum of restorative practices, being preventative and informal to more responsive and formal, and recognizing that we like circles. Circles are good, but to really be the most effective, they need to be grounded in our system that we have in our districts. And so we need to think about, as we're adopting these practices, how can we be intentional about integrating these different practices within restorative practices into our MTSS or our PBIS multi-tiered system, because that is what's going to make it sustainable as we're building it in and folding it into what's already happening. So if you're adopting restorative practices in your district or in your school, really intentionally plan for how to integrate these within your school-wide initiatives, thinking specifically about incorporating it into your MTSS framework through your systems and identifying your practices, and then really thinking about that data piece and how can you leverage those to really have the best implementation and rollout of these practices and make the best impact for your outcomes. We have a couple of resources here for you. Circle Forward is a book that has a ton of different circle scripts. The Restorative Practice Handbook comes from the International Institute for Restorative Practices. Really good resource. And then Circle in the Square is a book. It's not too long, and it's kind of an oldie but a goodie. Has a lot of great ideas for circles, building circles. It does touch on the preventative all the way to responsive. So check those out. They're all linked in there. And that is all the content we have for today. We do have an exit ticket. We would love any feedback you have on our Coffee Connects as we are thinking and planning for next year. And next month, April 16th, we have our School Safety Coffee Connect. I believe we're partnering with A. Martin with the Office of School Safety. So check that out. And thank you for joining us today. We also have a couple of reminders. If you aren't signed up for Coffee Connect in April and May, you can sign up here. We're working on next year. We have our foundational restorative practice training in June. We have one in Kearney and also one in La Vista, so you can sign up for that. We are going to host an advanced restorative practice training coming up. You do have to attend the foundational trainings before. So keep your eyes out for that if you're interested. And then we have a couple more events this spring with our Beyond check-in, check-out training, and then Coffee Connects on school safety in April. And then May, we're talking about mental health literacy in July. And then we also put out our summer training events. These are all free, hosted on Zoom. And our MTSS Summit is next year, this year, I guess, October 9th and 10th. So our theme is Road Trip, Navigating Literacy on the MTSS Highway. There is a focus on literacy, but know that there will be some things that other like sessions around other topics. And if you want to submit a proposal, we are still accepting proposals for breakout sessions. So our last question, you can put it in the chat or share out, is how can you proactively use circles in your setting? All righty. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Know you can reach out with any questions, and we did record this, so we will post that, and you can look at it in the future for resources. Thank you all.